Uh, Thank you very much and welcome to all of you. Assalamu alaikum, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So it gives me pleasure to welcome you on behalf of APPNA Merit Committee webinar. So the topic for today's webinar is drug pricing and healthcare delivery. So I think this is one of the topic hardly touched upon in the past, and the objective of APPNA Merit Committee is to create a repository of information about the healthcare ecosystem in Pakistan. And I have mentioned the link to the YouTube channel where you can find all the information. So we are welcome Professor Zaheer-Ud-Din Babar. He is a professor in medicine and healthcare, director, Center for Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice Research, Department of Pharmacy, University of Huddersfield, Queensgate, Huddersfield, United Kingdom. So he is globally known for his work in pharmaceutical policy and practice, quality use of medicine, clinical pharmacy practice, access to medicines, and issue related to pharmacoeconomic. So he has published in high impact journals such as PLOS Medicine and The Lancet, and has acted as a consultant for World Health Organization, Royal Pharmaceutical Society, Health Actions International, International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Diseases, World Bank, European Union, International Pharmaceutical Federation, and Pharmaceutical Management Agency of New Zealand. His edited work includes economic evaluation of pharmacy services and pharmaceutical prices in the 21st century, pharmaceutical policies in countries with developing healthcare systems, global pharmaceutical policy and access to high-cost medicines, pharmacy practice research methods, pharmacy practice research case studies, and encyclopedia of pharmacy practice and clinical pharmacy. So these are published by elsewhere. And the most important thing about his footprint in Pakistan healthcare and life sciences. So Professor Zaheer-Ud-Din Babar is really instrumental and very generous in giving his input to Pakistan life sciences. So he was one of the key person to draft the drug policy during the last government, working with the the Dr. Mirza. And he was really very kind and very passionate to share his knowledge when we were developing the pharmaceutical pricing policy. So let me share with you that this is a very critical topic because there are so many stakeholders who are involved in pharmaceutical pricing. And the today flash news about Pakistan is that it's going to be the 5th most populous country. And, the food and the medicine, these are the important component. And there is a perpetual issue of medicine shortages in Pakistan. And the new medicine, they are available to the rest of the world. So they hardly are accessible to Pakistani population, and the multinational companies, their interest is going to be diluted day by day for the Pakistan market. They are pulling back. There is a shortage of life-saving vaccines and medicine. And this is a continuous thing. So many of the physicians who are in North America, their families, their loved ones, they are back in Pakistan. So this is the real missing link about the availability of medicine, and the availability of medicine and the drug pricing, they go hand in hand. So this is just a little bit elaborate discussion about the topic and the speaker. So may I request Professor Zaheer-Ud-Din Babar to start his presentation.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Very good afternoon from the UK. I would like to say thank you to Dr. Uzair Saab for a very kind introduction and warm welcome, and actually inviting me to talk about on this very important topic, which is on pharmaceutical pricing. Often this is a topic which actually generates quite a lot of sentiments because it is linked with the affordability of drugs in Pakistan and also all over the world. So in today's talk, we are going to talk about it from a very empirical and research-based perspective and looking at what we can do. What is the Pakistan's pricing policy? What are the problems and what we can do actually to overcome some of these barriers and challenges. So I'm going to finish it in maybe 25 to 30 minutes, and then perhaps there will be an opportunity to ask questions and further discussion and debate. So the way actually I've set it up, the whole presentation is actually being structured in two parts. The scene to give you an idea of what the global pharmaceutical pricing looks like, and then where do Pakistan stand in this context. And the second part, then perhaps we're going to zoom in Pakistani context and talk about some of the issues and challenges, actually. And again, thank you to Zaheer Saab, who kindly invited me in the previous government to actually work on Pakistan's suggestive pricing policy. So some of the things which I'm going to talk about in the later part of the presentation actually is relevant in this context. So as I said, the first I'm going to talk about a global overview and then perhaps on specific focus on Pakistan. Looking at the global pharmaceutical spending, if you look at the global pharmaceutical spending, it's increasing worldwide. And a report which is being published by IQVIA, which is a global marketing and research agency related to pharmaceuticals, I'm sure that you would be able, you have a good idea about what IQVIA is. It's going to reach 1.6 trillion, the total market size by 2025. So it's a sort of a big expenditure, a large section of expenditure on pharmaceuticals if you look at the healthcare expenditures. But interestingly, it's important to know that when we have this debate, that out of these 1.6 trillion or whatever is it, where the major spending is in terms of the value of medicine. So for example, the United States is at the top, followed by Canada, Japan, Europe, Australia, South Korea, and then a very small percentage in terms of value of medicine, not volume of medicine, but value of medicine is being shared by these three countries, which are Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So from a global standpoint, from a global pharmaceutical industry point of view, Pakistan is indeed important, but its importance is relative. So in this increasing market, what are the challenges with regards to accessing medicines or for the affordability of medicine? Half of these medicines spending is in the United States and European Union, followed by Japan and emerging economies. There is a specialty medicine growth, and the cancer drugs, diabetes medicines, newer medicines of autoimmune disorders. These are the sort of major contributor to these pharmaceutical expenditures. Another important point is that drug expenditures are actually rising faster than other healthcare expenditures, such as physician salaries or hospitals and things. So, and why these drug expenditures are rising faster? Because of the newer medicines, as I talked about earlier, because of the aging population, and because of increased demand for specialty treatment and products by the patient. So we have this kind of scenario where the newer medicines are coming to the market, we have an aging population, and the drug expenditures are actually increasing. So in this sort of context, access is becoming a major challenge, not only in low and middle income countries, including Pakistan, but also in high income countries as well. I'm looking at from the global agencies such as United Nations point of view, access to essential medicines is under the UN Sustainable Development Goal 3.8. It specifically mentions the importance of access to safe, effective, quality, and affordable essential medicines for all people. But still we have challenges because about 1/3 of the global population does not have access to essential medicines, and 400 million people out of these 300 million people live in middle income countries. As I said, that previously this was an issue, access to medicine was an issue, focusing on lower middle income countries, but it's becoming a challenge for high income countries as well. For example, in Europe, there are serious concerns that yearly price increase will have significant impact on health system budget. So for example, the cancer drugs, the expenditures on cancer drugs actually in some countries constitute about half of the health expenditures in that particular country. So globally, if you look at the global pharmaceutical expenditures, you would see that in terms of health expenditures, that's about 50 to 20% in high income countries, but in low and middle income countries, the percentage is much more. It's actually about 70 to 80%, somewhere near. So it is showing you that actually in low and middle income countries, pharmaceuticals are sort of an important part for the treatment. Interestingly, the Lancet Commission estimated that between, this is the number which is required, $13 to $25 per capita to finance a basic package of around 200 essential medicines in all low and middle income countries. And but a report which was published by Lancet, it shows that many low and middle income countries actually spend less than $13 per capita on pharmaceuticals. So even then, $13 per capita is actually not a very big amount, but then in many countries we're even not able to afford this number to provide access to the masses. The role of pharmaceuticals in the treatment in the mainstay. And this slide is quite vital to actually, just to give you an idea. For example, in the cardiovascular disease, disability adjusted life years, it fell by 30% in rich countries, but it only declined by 9% in poor countries. So it's actually showing you that if you have more accessibility and affordability of medicines, then of course you can do much more. You can actually empower people, you can improve their health outcomes, you can reduce disability, and actually you could have their quality adjusted life years many times more. So what are the factors which impact on access and equity of medicine in an individual country? In some countries, we have seen that there is no government control on drug prices. And I'm going to talk about it in more detail in a bit. Excessive use of innovative brands. So innovative brands are those medicines when the first time a pharmaceutical company manufactures medicine that expiry of patent after 20 years is produced. Extension of patents in some countries, or development of specialty drugs, cancer, and orphan medicine in the recent years. So these are some of the factors which are impacting on access and equity of medicines in these countries. There's a kind of major challenges we have to address these, because if we could improve those challenges, then we can improve the access to masses. So these are some of the problems. What are the solutions? So one of the solutions we have is actually the concept of fair pricing of medicine. If you look at the overall debate on access to medicine, then pricing, drug pricing is the single most important factor. High medicine pricing or drug pricing, that's the single most important factor which contributes or which hinders the access. So what I'm trying to say is that if the drug prices are high in a given country, then of course given or taken that national health insurance in that particular country, the affordability would be lower. But if you have control on drug prices, then of course you could improve the access and the affordability would be better. So in this context, Moon et al. Published a paper on concept of fair pricing for medicine. And one of the things which they argue, because the pharmaceutical industry always argue, having to recoup their cost of drug development and research. So the mechanism to dealing drug development costs from final pricing are required. So this is one of the things which they suggested, and I found it extremely useful to advocate the concept of fair pricing for medicines. So fair pricing means that actually you get a fair return on investment for your products for the pharmaceutical industry, but at the same time, your return on investment or profitability is not excessive. So you have a sort of what we call it a rational pricing structure or fair return on investment. So most control prices, well, directly or indirectly or through different sort of ways they control. But then there are some countries which absolutely do not control medicine prices. And the studies have shown that in countries where the prices are controlled, affordability is better. Many of these studies which I've listed, you can see on the screen, these are empirical research which I have done. So this is all basically some of the work which we have done in different parts of the world, in Malaysia, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in European Union and in other parts of the world, that actually if you do control prices, the affordability would be better. So that's the take-home message. This is the same slide with a different sort of an angle, that if you regulate market, there are different methods to control prices. So for example, in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, there is a direct control on drug prices. There is indirect control in some other countries, for example, in United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, where you would see that the government actually negotiate to buy drugs through different mechanisms. So you wouldn't have out-of-pocket expenditures, but it's still controlled. There are things, so for example, value-based pricing or using pharmacoeconomics to evaluate the value of medicine and then pay according to that value. So this is another form of having indirect control on drug prices. The WHO has issued guidelines on country pharmaceutical pricing. And basically, if you want to develop a pharmaceutical pricing policy of a country, then normally you do follow those guidelines in this context. Forming a medicine pricing policy in a country is a challenging task. It depends whether it's a high income country, low or middle, because the countries are at a different level of health system. Western developed systems are used as guidelines, where pharmaceutical systems are inherently different from the health system of developing countries. So in this context, policymakers need to understand the pharmacy and reimbursement system of their own country before they could set up a medicine pricing policy. So these are some of the prerequisites of forming a policy. The objective of a medicine pricing policy, any policy in any country, is actually to ensure access to safe, effective medicines, good quality medicine, to establish fair medicines pricing mechanism, and to support pharmaceutical industry. So these are the objectives of a medicine pricing policy of a country. Framing a medicines policy for Pakistan specifically. So this is the commentary article which I published, and you're most welcome to Google and look through this article. This is totally free, open access article. And this gives you the idea of suggesting that how to and where to form the Pakistan's medicines pricing policy. So the prerequisite of to form the policy have to look at the global scenario, research or empirical data which is available within the country. What are the countries with the similar socioeconomic status are doing and what has worked for other countries and what has not worked for other countries. So these are some of the things which we want to look at forming a country's medicines pricing policy. So this is an exercise which is a scientific in nature, it's evidence-based, and it's empirical because the data you draw depends on the empirical research studies which are being done. So forming a medicine pricing policy is nothing like that you sit in a room with 10 people and then you think about what would be the appropriate price. It doesn't work that way. And all countries in the world, majority countries in the world, they have actually specialized people, specialized agencies, employing dozens of people of different background, health economists, pharmacists, clinical pharmacologists, statistician who actually do these complex exercises. The difference between, before we allude further on medicine pricing policy, we need to understand the difference between the pricing in a highly developed country and a low and middle income country. As you would know that in low and middle income country, a majority of the expenditures are being paid by the out of pocket. So the countries like Pakistan, you would safely say about 80% or even 90% of the expenditures on pharmaceuticals are being paid by the out of pocket. People are paying by themselves. Whereas in developed countries, these are being paid by the government. The countries like United Kingdom or New Zealand, where I've lived, you pay part charges. So you pay a small amount of money and then the rest is being paid by the government. But you wouldn't know what is the actual price of the medicine. So that's the fundamental difference while you're forming a pricing policy for a low and middle income country or for a country which is a highly developed country. And in most highly developed countries, they have two different agencies, which are basically looking at the price setting mechanism. So they have set up a entirely new agency to talk about pharmacoeconomics and pricing. So for example, in New Zealand, it's called PharmAC, the Pharmaceutical Management Agency of New Zealand. In UK, it's called National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which actually do pharmacoeconomic evaluation, complex pharmacoeconomic evaluation to appraise the value-based pricing or to set medicine prices. As I said, the countries, including Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, they have medicine pricing control in South Asia. And these countries, they have an absolute control on prices, and these are set at private sector retail pharmacies. So what does it mean that for the same medicines, for an individual brand, prices are uniform? And this system has generated low prices in international terms. If you compare these prices with other countries, if you compare that, for example, with Malaysia or Indonesia or Philippines or Thailand, some of the Southeast Asian countries where the prices are not controlled, then you would definitely see the difference or benefit of having a price control, because absolutely that's very useful to improve access and affordability of medicines. In Pakistan, what are the sort of, the background and context? In Pakistan, there are significant out-of-pocket costs for pharmaceuticals for consumers and for patients. The prices are controlled at retail pharmacy level and it's written on the medicine package. And these are set uniformly throughout the country by the Ministry of National Health Services Regulation and Coordination. And we have done some analysis of Pakistan's medicines pricing structure. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about empirical studies in Pakistani context, and also some suggestive reforms. How do we achieve and better improve access to medicine situation or having more rational pricing structure? So some of the pricing studies which we have done by using a WHO and high methodology, what we have observed that those several medicines are reasonably priced in international terms. However, there are others for which the prices were high in Pakistan. And in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about again, I'm going to come back and point out which were those medicines which were sort of high priced in international terms. The majority of these high priced medicines are innovative brands. As I said, innovative brands are those which are first time a pharmaceutical company manufacture it. Um, Pakistan has used what we call it a cost plus pricing formula. This has worked for Pakistan in the past to keep pricing affordable. However, the WHO has actually now advised against using this formula because of the transparency issues, because it's very difficult and very hard to get the different ingredients and earmark the different pharmaceutical ingredient in a drug. So this was the study, which we have done a series of studies and published in scientific peer-reviewed journals, but you could see some of the blue lines which are showing you that the prices were high in international terms. So these were the reference prices. So we compare the prices by using a complex World Health Organization and Health Action International methodology. So this methodology was developed at Harvard, and this was time tested in over 50 countries. So we have used a similar methodology by using systematic random sampling in different parts of the country. And what we observed that actually the prices of, for example, for some of the drugs, such as simvastatin, omeprazole, fluconazole, ceftriaxone, atorvastatin, they were high in international terms. And high, up to what extent they were high? So we would say that if a drug is 1 times higher in public sector, this would cover the profit margin. But if this is like 3 times higher than in private pharmacies, then we would say that the price is high. But for some of these drugs, for example, fluconazole, you can say it's about 60 times higher. So this price is really excessive. So when we say that in Pakistan the prices are high, the prices are not high for all drugs. The prices are only high for few drugs. And you have to do a scientific sort of study and evaluation to see where the prices are high, and then perhaps to develop interventions which could promote the fair pricing structure in the country. So what's the solution in this context? It's critical in this context to look at case by case basis, and what we have observed that we have seen that the prices were high, they were sort of innovative brands. We also looked at some of the issues in Pakistan's pricing policy. For example, the previous pricing policy of 2018. And one of the things which were actually quite interesting to see, that the prices were earmarked and benchmarked with countries like Sri Lanka, which is fine because it has a good pricing structure. But then also some other countries, for example, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippines, where themselves, these countries have very high pricing. So you wouldn't be actually comparing and benchmarking your prices with the countries where itself those countries are very high in terms of international level. It also compares the prices with some highly developed countries, including Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. So, but even in these countries, the comparison wouldn't be apple to apple or oranges to oranges, because these are highly developed countries. And even Australian prices are considered very high in the global context. So again, there are some question marks of comparison for using highly developed countries for comparison. As I said, another problem we have with the global pricing is that sometime when you're comparing your prices with another country and you ask them to give you the drug prices, the prices which are published prices, for example, in UK or Australia or New Zealand, they're not real prices because the pharmaceutical companies do give them discounts and rebates. So what they publish is not real. So what you have is real. These are confidential rebates, and it's very, very difficult for you to actually estimate what is the real price. So in this context, these are some of the challenges. So we have seen that in the previous pricing policy of 2018, some of these countries were listed. So it was very difficult to see that how these comparisons are being made. So if you need to build a pricing policy, what could be the ingredients? What could be the elements? One of the things to start up with, as I said, by using WHO and high methodology. So in this methodology, you compare the median community retail pharmacy prices with international reference prices. And these international reference prices were published an International Drug Price Indicator Guide, which is being published by Management Sciences for Health in Arlington, United States. So you compare international reference prices with median community retail price, and then you get a median price ratio. And this I was talking about earlier on, a median price ratio 1 in the public sector and a median price ratio of about 5 in the private sector. That's considered reasonable. Anything more than that would be considered a bit more profitable or excessive. And this 1 and 3, it would include markups and profit margins, and it will give enough margins for the pharmaceutical industry growth. Looking at Pakistan's, the studies which we have done in Pakistan, some of these were excessive. For example, ASA where atorvastatin, they were 18 times higher than IRP. Ciprofloxacin, ceftriaxone injection, fluconazole, which was about 60 times higher. Omeprazole, simvastatin, they were about 12 times higher. So if you look at the range about 5 times, and then you look at the range of about 60 times with margins along the supply chain. I wouldn't go into detail who was actually earning what, because that would, of course, need a more sort of a detailed analysis. So these medicines and others are commonly used by Pakistanis, resulting in significant out-of-pocket payments. So perhaps further studies, detailed exploratory studies are needed in this context. So what is the suggestive pharmaceutical pricing policy? So the suggestive pharmaceutical pricing policy is actually something to build on country guidelines, WHO guidelines on country pharmaceutical pricing policy, which I was part of development of those guidelines as well. So there is a need to use multiple pricing policy in a country. And what could be those multiple pricing policies? We're going to talk about it a bit. And these policies include internal reference pricing, external reference pricing, value-based pricing, and markup regulations. So this is a snapshot of basically a set of policies which we could use. So when we say pricing policy, we didn't mean to have a single policy. We basically have a mixture of policies. So a mixture of policies would include internal reference pricing, external reference pricing, value-based pricing, markup regulations, and cost-plus pricing. So in a bit, we can talk a little bit in more detail. So for example, cost-plus pricing, this was previously used in a number of countries and practice. So for example, it was used in Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Iran, and Pakistan. And it was successfully used. But now the WHO has advised against using this. And one of the reasons that, because it's very difficult to get transparent information, obtaining the information and validating the information. So it's external price reference. Pakistan pricing policy does include external price referring, but it depends that what set of countries you're including. So as I have said earlier on in the presentation, if you're including those countries like Malaysia and others, where themselves they have high prices, then of course it will be very difficult. So external price reference do work. They're likely to reduce the prices of medicine, but it depends what are your benchmark countries. So I've suggested the benchmark countries such as India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, South Africa. So these are some of the countries which would be useful if we are comparing a basket of medicine with this set of countries. And again, this is kind of a suggestive mechanism. We can have a Minister of Health arm basically looking at this, and they can include or exclude a country, it depends. And then you can take a median of those countries, median set of prices of those countries, and then you can compare that with the Pakistan prices, and then you can set a price. Internal reference price is more towards when you compare a brand and generic medicine, or when you compare medicine within the same therapeutic class. So for example, you can talk about AC inhibitors, and you are going to compare one ACE inhibitor to another ACE inhibitor, then you would use a policy of internal reference pricing. And the countries, again, have used this very successfully to basically reduce the prices of medicine. So if you look at the internal use of internal reference pricing in Pakistan, the first generic medicine, what we are suggesting here, it could be priced 40 to 50% below the originator, whereas the price of first biosimilar could actually go in the similar sort of range, however, as well, about 30%. However, there are suggestions and other pricing models can also be explored. For example, in Austria, the greater price reductions have been seen in the case of generics, and also for the Netherlands, they have used internal reference pricing, and they've successfully seen the prices of statins have gone down as a use of internal reference pricing. Value-based pricing is a concept, and value-based pricing is basically simply is the use of health technology assessment or pharmacoeconomics, or health economics. And for value-based pricing, what you need very sophisticated health economics teams to build the data and do modeling, and basically appraise the value of a medicine. And basically it's used for new medicines, such as cancer drugs or high-cost medicines. So it's again very effective. But the challenge with the country is similar to Pakistan is that we don't really have the resources or skilled human resource to build a value-based pricing structure. It's extremely useful, something which middle-income countries are now increasingly using, such as Malaysia or Thailand, where they have built models to the Thai FDA has built models to conduct value-based pricing. And this is something which I believe Pakistan should be doing in the future because of the aging population we have. We have a huge population, as Dr. Uzair Saab has mentioned, and also the demands and the needs are perhaps, in there. The lessons can be learned from high-income country. For example, in Stockholm in Sweden has successfully operated a limited set of medicines. So you don't really need to have thousands and thousands of medicines to be registered in Pakistan. So for example, in Sweden, we have seen 2,000 essential medicines could cover over 90% of the needs in ambulatory care. So you need a shorter list, but carefully screened list. This approach has been very effective to promote the rational use of medicine. This also begs the question that why do low and middle income countries need new high-priced medicines when patient in ambulatory setting can be well treated with a smaller set of medicine? So you need majority smaller set of medicine. You may need some newer medicines, but these new medicines may need to be looking at the markup regulations. In Pakistan, currently there's a markup of 35 to 15%, which seems to be defined. But one of the things which I've suggested is actually to develop a regressive markup structure in which the markup rate decreases as the price increase. This needs to be implemented rather than a fixed percentage markup. And transparency is also needed when setting markup along the supply and distribution chain. And this also needs to be built through legislative and administrative reforms. So the proposed medicine pricing policy structure is some of the things which I've talked about in the table before. Innovative brand, the price should take into account the use of external reference pricing, and preferably the price must not exceed the medicine's lowest price in any of the following countries, including Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Bangladesh, Iran, India, and Sri Lanka. For Me Too medicines, a cost minimization analysis could be done where you could have the generic equivalent and you can go for the lowest price. So the cost minimization analysis among pharmacoeconomic analysis is one of the easiest analysis is to do, and you would go for the cheaper. So for the new presentation in the same dosage of medicine already marketed, the price should be worked out based on the arithmetic mean of the prices of a previously launched medicine. It is suggested the price must not exceed the average price weighted by sales of available presentation of the medicine that have the same active ingredient and strength and dosage form. Generic medicine should not exceed 40 to 50% of the respective reference medicine. So it's quite essential that if you are using generic medicine, if you are bringing generic medicines to in Pakistani market, they are rationally priced, they are not overpriced. And this is the sort of benchmark. Most of our generics are rationally priced, except very few. So the decision to, these are recommendations for the future. The decision to formulate and set prices needs to be based on empirical pricing studies. So whatever we have to do, it needs to be research-based. In the last 30 minutes or so, I've tried to cover what are the things which are needed. Price setting is a scientific process. It's not something which depends on the wish and whims of somebody making a decision. So hence you need research in low and middle income countries. Though the WHO has provided guidelines to form country pricing policies, but these guidelines are very generic guidelines. They're not specific. So you need in-country expert teams, you need people whose job is just to work on pricing. So basically it's not an easy sort of thing. It's a complex thing, which I've tried to make it simple for you in the last 30 minutes. Adequate human resources and skilled personnel are required for implementation, monitoring, and ongoing evaluation of medicine prices. So this is not something which is a one sort of process, one-time process. If you have built a pricing policy today, you need to regularly monitor it because of the consumer price index, because of a lot of changes we have in the world today, and so on and so forth. In Pakistan, there is a need to develop a center for evidence-based medicine and pharmacoeconomics. This needs to be established. And we also need to look at the regular price revision to safeguard the interest for consumers. So with that, I would like to conclude my session today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Once again, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Zaheer-Ud-Din. So what a wonderful presentation and very practical and very problem-solving approach. So I welcome, we have wonderful professional who has participated, two professional from Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan, Dr. Abedullah and Akhtar Abbas Khan. And we will involve them in discussion, but let's have a quick look to the question and answers. And the first question is from Mr. Adil Siddiqui, who is a pharmacist with Shaukat Khanum Cancer Hospital. So his question is, does universal health coverage in Pakistan and transparency a good short-term measure to improve health system, strengthening in hand access to quality medicine with fair pricing? So this is quite an open-ended question. So Professor Zaheer, do you see, how would you like to respond to this, please?
No, thank you. I think it's a very important question, but we need to look at that. Whatever the universal health coverage means, that we are trying to cover people in the government sector. In my understanding, we have a fair government public sector hospitals where the people don't pay for their medicine. This is my understanding. But then we have a large part of the population which pay out of pocket. And in this out-of-pocket segment, how much are we paying to cover universal health care? I'm not very sure. We could have different schemes. We could have people from defense forces. We could have people from some semi-government organization with some insurance schemes. Or we could have a third NGO sector where the people are being paid. But I think the large majority of the people do pay out of pocket. And that's where you need to do something. So the pricing policy is actually impacting on those people, the 80% or 90% of the people who are paying out-of-pocket expenditures. So if you regulate price at the central level, then of course you are reaching at the top or bottom. Through universal health coverage, if you are promoting access in public hospitals, if you're promoting availability of medicines in public hospitals, that of course it could help people. But I think that's not the discussion and debate here, because the public hospital, the government is buying those medicines and the government has its own sort of mechanism. So I think the debate here is basically the pricing policy in the private sector, the private sector, community retail pharmacies, where the medical stores, where the people go and buy medicines.
Thank
I
you.
hope I've answered the
Yeah.
question.
So, Professor Z, the next question is from someone. Is there an association between drug pricing by pharmaceutical and standards of drug? That is, are substandard drugs sold
Mhm.
at lower price and the revenue made by their higher sale volume by pharma companies? So, this is quite open-ended question, as you know that the pricing is controlled. So how to differentiate the
Yeah.
quality of pharmaceutical based on pricing?
Thank you very much, Uzair Saab. I think this is a very good question, and this is a misconception which I would like to clarify. Um, Pricing the world over, and the WHO has also given the verdict. The pricing is not linked to the quality, and pricing should not link to the quality. Medicine is registered in the country, it has to be safe, effective, and good quality. 3, 4 principles which a drug regulatory authority needs to be upheld, whether the price is 1 rupee or whether the price is 10 rupee. So the different variation of quality, I think that's an issue of medicine's quality, safety, and effectiveness. Now, looking at that, because the people didn't argue that because we are manufacturing good quality medicine, we need to be paid more. My opinion is that there should not be a such thing of a bad quality medicine. If there is a medicine, it needs to be good quality, otherwise, no. And you need to give a fair pricing of medicine. So the price control does not mean that we do not want to reward pharmaceutical industry, as I've said in my presentation. What we are after a rational, fair pricing structure where the pricing is not excessive, but it's, at the same time, it's not also too little. We want to reward pharmaceutical industry as well, but we should not compromise on the drug quality. Often I've seen people saying that pay different prices of different quality. No, this has not worked. This does not this does not happen anywhere in the world. Okay, so we need to stick with to produce good quality medicine, whatever the cost is. I hope
Uh,
that's clarified.
Thank you. The next question is from Varda Bhatti. Can you please name few countries in Asia and Europe that spend half of its health expenditure on cancer, as you mentioned?
Yeah, large number of countries. So, for example, some of the countries I didn't mention in Asia, but in Europe. So, for example, in Austria and some other countries, they would spend about 40 to 50% on newer cancer drugs because it's becoming increasingly something which is of concern. And previously, um, access to medicine was a thing only for low income countries. But we have seen now that high income countries are also facing the challenges. They're also feeling the difficulty. These were not the difficulties for them 20 years or 30 years ago. Access to essential medicine was a term which was coined by WHO only for low income countries, only for poor countries. They consider that we don't have such problems. But with the newer cancer drugs, with the newer treatment options, of course, the government is paying. People are not paying. The government is paying in these countries. Still, you feel the health budget is increasing, and there is no country in the world who could afford to pay for all medicines in the world. Whatever, I mean, however the rich a country is, it's extremely difficult. That's why you have strategies such as pharmacoeconomics, such as value-based pricing to appraise the value of medicine and then to justify that which medicine to include in the formulary, which medicine to include for public subsidy.
Thank you. So another question is from the regulator. Thank you very much, Mohammad Akhtar Abbas Khan. So his question is, if the drug development cost is delinked from final price of a medicine, will this not affect the innovation of new drugs?
Of course, this is a debate that whether it would affect, and I didn't include in my presentation, but I have the data. Most drug information is done in United States. And there is a data, there are studies which are being published that 40 to 50% of the new drugs which are being developed in the universities. the precursors, and they are being funded by the taxpayer money. And not only taxpayer money, but they're also given rebates. So there is a lot of debate and discussion that where would you go? I didn't include those slides, but I do have those slides. If anyone is interested, I can send it to you. That where do we go? Whether we go for profits or where, and I think it's a difficult sort of thing. So we need to come to a balance that where we are not only safeguarding the interest of pharmaceutical industry, but we're also protecting the interest of consumer. It's a difficult balance, but we need to achieve. And from the experience, what we have seen, the studies I've shown you, if you give free ride to industry, there is no stoppage. What we have seen in the countries like Malaysia, for example, there's absolutely no control on pharmaceuticals, absolutely. And Malaysian drug prices are higher than Australian drug prices. So the companies do set their own prices. There is no control, absolutely no control. And they don't innovate drugs. Malaysia does not produce a single medicine. These are mostly imported drugs or generics which are being manufactured in the country. So I think the debate here is that the evidence which we have seen, and I'm not talking for myself, but the studies which we have published, what we have seen, if you don't control medicine prices, the prices would always be higher. So that's the argument. But so you need to have some form of price control.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions, Dr. Awais Raj, but I will take them together. So first move to Dr. Fawzia Sadiq. She is looking after the research at Shifa International Hospital. And thank you very much, Fawzia, for joining. So her question is, where does DRAP stands in all of this mechanism, and how can we convince pharma to distribute a high-cost drug like PCSK9 inhibitors to treat familial hypercholesteremia, because she's working on these familial issues. So she's involved in research and she's struggling to make these products available. So over to you, Professor Zaheer.
Simply, I wouldn't know the answer for this because I'm just
Yes,
commenting on the
but we have
pricing
Dr.
policy.
Ubaid, so I will
Yeah,
request him really to respond to
yeah.
this.
So I think it's more of a registration of medicine. So the DRAP is the best possible
Absolutely,
position to answer.
absolutely. So another question from Imran Mirza: where do drug manufacturing companies in Pakistan source their chemicals from? I think this may be not in your domain, because that's concerning with the drug regulatory, and we can ask Dr. Abadullah. If they are coming from abroad, wouldn't their supplier and logistic costs be a major factor? So I will keep it for Dr. Ubaidullah, and then we have a couple of questions from
I just
Dr.
want to comment on Uzair Saab, if you don't
Please,
mind,
please,
on
please,
the
please.
cost of the manufacturing cost and all that. So this is called cost plus formula. So the WHO has advised using against going for the cost plus and looking at the cost of each single sort of thing. That has become very, very problematic because of the transparency issues. So again, I would suggest not going for the cost plus formula. And most countries in the world, they are not using it anymore. No country in Asia is using anymore, and also in the Europe as well. So it's a very difficult. I know it's very easy to calculate and look at the cost of this chemical and that chemical and assign a value and go for that. It's very easy, but the modern pharmaceutical pricing does not work in this way. The modern pharmaceutical pricing is external reference pricing, internal reference pricing, and to look at the value-based pricing. Sorry.
Oh, thank you very much. So we welcome Dr. Ubaidullah. Dr. Ubaid, thank you very much for your participation. You have always been very kind to take out your time and participate. So I have some of the question from the participant, and you are in a better position to respond to those questions. So the first question is from Dr. Awais Siraj. That instead of focusing on pricing, shouldn't the regulator focus on quality of generics, that is production of same quality, efficacious and safe drug across all companies? There are over 500 manufacturers of antibiotic and painkiller. Are they producing same quality of drug? If yes, the market forces will automatically bring the price down. So what's your take on that, please?
Thank you very much, Uzair sir. First, I really appreciate that the selection of topic selection is very appreciable because it is a topic which is very needed. And Professor Zaheer has very beautifully articulated the global drug pricing mechanism in journal and then specifically focusing on the developing countries mechanism, including Pakistan. That I really appreciate. But if we see that in much part of the world, if we say that what the national regulatory authorities perform, so basically they perform the function of the drug registration or something like that, based on the safety, efficacy, and quality parameters. And as Professor Zaheer has highlighted that in most of the regulatory authorities, they don't perform the pricing mechanism, and there are some parallel bodies in the government which perform the pricing mechanism, and that is the right direction and right method for the determining the pricing, because as the professor has said, that pricing is altogether a different mechanism and different field, which probably at times it is not the job of regulator in most part of the world. So anyhow, it's my comment for the national regulatory authorities. If we see the national pricing mechanism of Pakistan, then we can safely say that before 2015 or before the establishment of DREP, it was probably, although I'm not the right person to answer the pricing mechanism, but definitely somehow I am in the regulatory authority looking after the pricing in some way. So it was a cost plus formula. He's right that previously it was the same mechanism which was later on not advised by the WHO. And after the 2015, it is the reference pricing of the basket countries. And then policy was amended in 2018. And again, the government last regime was trying to amend the policy due to some of the various basic problems in the pricing policy. Like every pricing fixation is being done by the federal government, and it's not the anywhere in the world that federal cabinet is supposed to fix the prices. And there are some other bottlenecks due to which availability of some very essential medicines are still hampered in the country, like some first-line anti-cancer drugs are not available. There are some vaccines which are not available due to our existing pricing policy. So that is the very basic the very basic point, that our existing pricing policy definitely needs revision to be in line with the some developed pricing policy, but keeping in view, as the presenter has also said, in Pakistan, most of our population is doing out of part expenditure for their medicines. So there are some school of thought in the country as well, which are focusing that pricing should be linked with the availability, and it should be decontrolled, and the market forces should determine the pricing. So probably Pakistan is not a country where such phenomena can be floated and adopted, because in such a scenario, probably there are vibes that not only prices will be increased, but rather in some cases prices will be out of the control of the public at large as well. So it was my general comment on the pricing. Now coming to the query by our very dear fellow Dr. Owais. Yes, Dr. Owais has very rightly said there are about 500, other 620 manufacturers in the country there, and about 400 are manufacturing oral solid dosage form. So if we see that how the regulatory mechanism works, so if we say that the whether regulatory mechanisms are compromised in the country in terms of the not manufacturing of the quality standards, so definitely, being a regulator, I will say that it is not the scenario at all, because when we approve any drug, and specifically after the establishment of DRAP, now we are following all those standards, like we have adopted the common technical document, which is the standard for the registration of any pharmaceutical preparation. And after 2019, we have not accepted any application which is not been submitted on the common technical document. So primarily, we can say that the basic criteria for the registration of drug or for the availability of the drug, if that has been met by the not only by the applicant, but then definitely we can say that this compliance is a regular feature. One can't say that if a company is a compliant as of today, then that company will remain compliant for whole of the life. Compliance is a regular feature, and GMP monitoring and testing of the drug as per the pharmacopoeia standard is essentially required, not only by the manufacturer, but compliance should be monitored by the regulator as well at a regular interval. And just to share with you that because we are trying to adopt all those parameters for the determination and regulation of the pharmaceutical, which are being adopted by the international community. So we are now moving to the PICS as well for the GMP auditing. And definitely all these parameters which we are saying, then all the compliance of the safety quality parameters and safety efficacy will be more stringent than as of today. So we can safely say that that all those manufacturers who have been permitted for the manufacturing of any drug, they are meeting the baseline requirement for safety, efficacy, and quality. And my last point about that's I think, based on my experience with working with some international organization, WHO, and as well, if we see that whether all the products manufactured by all across the globe are of the same quality, then definitely my answer will be no, because WHO itself says that when you say about the specification of any active pharmaceutical ingredient, then we can see that there are three specifications or three parameters for the active pharmaceutical ingredients. The primary requirement is of the pharmacopoeia grade, which every manufacturer is following. Then there is another yardstick for the pharmaceutical quality management and API specifically, and that is for the ICH grade, International Conference on Harmonization grade. And third one is the EDQM grade. And definitely, and all these grades are vary with respect to the purity level of any pharmaceutical product. But at the same time, again, now because we are discussing the pricing mechanism, now the price of all these components of the pharmacopoeia, of the ICH grade, and of the EDQM grade are altogether different. And probably, if we see that the price of the pharmacopoeia grade and EDQM grade is more than double. So then definitely pricing comes everywhere when we talk about the quality. And definitely, I hope that Professor Zaheer will agree that quality comes with price. If we say that if low price drug, low price commodity is of very good quality, then it can't be the same. So my take for all these things is that when we talk about the quality, then safety and efficacy, which are the prime criteria for the registration and availability of the drug, then pricing mechanism should be sufficiently good that it should give a good profit to the manufacturer so that he can adopt all the parameters for the maintenance of that very quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abadullah. My apology to many of the participants that because of the shortage of time, we could not address all the questions. So we welcome Professor Akhtar Hamid, who is with the University of Toronto and a practicing physician. Being from the user side, he is also President, Canada, Pakistan Research and Development Council and a known medical figure here in Toronto area. So shares his experience of the drug pricing, though he's from Canada, where Professor Zaheer mentioned that the per capita spending after US is the maximum. So Dr. Hamid, would you like to please share your views on this?
Thank you, Dr. Zaheer, and very interesting and insightful talk by Professor Zaheer. Being a pediatrician, I have some limited knowledge. I can just only give you some facts about our Canadian diaspora. The drug pricing are being controlled by the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board Canada, which protects and informs our consumers. And it's kind of a quasi-judiciary body which helps to regulate the pricing. According to them, even the sales of the patented medicine in Canada reached 17.5 billion, which is increased, I'm talking about in 2021 or 2020, which is increase of 1.6%. Other thing is, if you look at that, the Canada remains still a a market for a pharmaceutical company representing around 2.1% of the worldwide sales. But if you look at UK, the UK spends the same, Canada spends the same as compared to the half of the population of UK. Now, the question here for you, Professor Zaheer, you mentioned there is no good or bad quality. I mean, then how come one paracetamol or Panadol has a different prices and they have different effects, number one. Number two, is there any variation according to you, or should be there any variation of medicine which is being used by the from pediatric or to the geriatric? Because these are the population very vulnerable. After a certain age, their income goes down, and they usually live on certain medication, apart from those cancer medication, which is definitely a very high price. And the last one, it's just regarding, in Canada, I understand, or I believe that it's not a monopoly of companies who provide the medicine supply, but I think it's like more oligopoly. I mean, there are like only few competitors here, which supplies the medicine to Canada. How about our Pakistan? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tasab, for asking these questions. I think when I was saying quality, not bad quality, what I mean is that there should not be any bad quality medicines which could be registered in any country. So we should not register a bad quality medicine. If the raw material is expensive, then of course, go for a rational pricing structure. We are not against providing the benefit to the pharmaceutical industry, but arguing and linking the quality with the price proportionally, it's a bad concept. And the highly developed countries, they have not practiced it. So for example, if you talk about Canada, United Kingdom, even Malaysia, New Zealand, Australia, they don't compromise on the quality of medicine when they register a drug in the country. The price is a different element. So you cannot say that we are going to give you lower price because my quality is going to be compromised. So I think principally that is a wrong concept. The more you propagate it, the more in Pakistan people would be able to compromise more the quality and give you the bad quality product. So I think that's the kind of angle we have. Give them a little bit higher price, but also go for good quality. So we should not compromise on quality. I think that's my standpoint. Number two, in Pakistan, majority of the medicines which are in Pakistan are produced by local pharmaceutical industry. There is a small percentage which is imported, and most of these drugs are innovator brands. So these are innovator brands which are not locally being manufactured, or they're under patent. So the patent is not violated or patent is not expired. So they are being produced, they can't be produced in the country, so they are imported. So I think as far as the distribution channels are concerned, I'm not really sure. We could have parallel channels. In some cases, Pakistan, through compulsory licenses, have violated patents. So for example, hepatitis C medicine, where the multinationals have given licenses to Pakistani pharmaceutical industry, such as Ferozans, to violate the patent and go for generics. So there are some channels. Even in United States, you can't get cheap medicine because of these patent issue, and of course there is no control. Canada, I'm very, very aware of the work of the Patent Medicine Review Board, which actually increased the prices of drugs through a consumer price index. So in Canada, the prices of drugs are linked through a CPI. So they have a formula to calculate. Whereas in United States, absolutely there is no control. That's why people from Canada go to US to buy and purchase medicine and then come back. But essentially, Canada is a universal healthcare system similar to what we have in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, and many other parts of the Europe as well. But the fundamental difference, I think, between low income and high income is again the purchasing of these medicines at community pharmacies. So that's where this debate is. And coming back to, there was a person who asked questions that why can't you focus on quality and not focus on pricing. What I'm trying to say here, pricing and quality are two different issues, and people have to do the job. The Drug Regulatory Authority has to look at the quality, but they also need to look at the pricing. So these are different elements of a national medicines policy of a country, whether it's a country A, country B, country C. Every country has the same component, whether it's Canada or whether it's Pakistan or whether it's Mauritius or whether whatever is it. So you cannot say that you're going to compromise one component of a policy and you're going to focus on other. You need to, as a regulator, as a health policy person, as a government person, you need to give equal value to all, whether it's accessibility of medicine, whether it's safety of medicine, whether it's quality of medicine, or, or whether to promote the use of medicine. I hope I've answered it.
Thank you, Professor Zaid. The discussion is so interesting and absorbing that I never mean to interrupt, but unfortunately we are passing by the time. So, many of the physicians, they have to go to their practices. So at the end, I will thank Professor Zaheer-Ud-Din for his wonderful discussion. And that's a very important, that is the missing link. And all the panelists, Dr. Ubaid, Akhtar Abbas, Professor Akhtar Hamid, and the participant particularly who passionately spared their time to participate, and institution like Shaukat Khanam and a lot of pharmacists, they are also here. So I am really thankful to you for joining today's session. But that was very close to my heart. I was thinking to have this on this panel because we are mapping the healthcare ecosystem. So as mentioned, healthcare delivery and affordability for the quality medicine, they go hand in hand. So with this, we close this session once again, saying thank you and enjoy the rest of the day, evening or night. All the best wishes, and thank you again for your participation. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.